When Marc Scorca walks into a room, there is a presence.
I felt inadequately dressed. And then he opened his mouth, and every sentence was either funny or just beautifully articulate.
Oh my God, this is the smartest man on earth, and I will never be able to have any kind of conversation with him whatsoever.
So I was a little intimidated, and then Marc Scorca smiled and extended his hand and said, "Norman Ryan, it's nice to meet you."
He's an unbelievably sympathetic person.
We just immediately became friends, and that was some years ago. I don't know, I hate to say for his sake.
Extremely savvy, thoughtful, insightful.
Handsome too, doesn't hurt.
I remember him with hair. I'm not responsible, however, for the loss of his hair. I'll blame that on other people in the opera world.
Always has this Cheshire cat grin that you're never quite sure what's behind it.
My grandparents were huge opera fans. I used to be able to enrage my grandmother by suggesting that Caruso and Ferrar had an affair, and she would take it personally. My grandfather had a huge collection of 78 RPM records, and as a kid I used to love playing them, watching that heavy plastic one-sided record slam down onto the turntable and spin so fast. That was my entry to opera. In high school, I would produce recitals of my friends. I always wanted to organize the events that would allow more talented people than I to share music with us. I interned at the Metropolitan Opera from my freshman year. I learned the repertoire backwards and forwards. My record was seeing 41 performances in 44 days, all standing room. Through the contacts that I had at the Met, I had an offer of a job as the ticket manager at Opera Company of Philadelphia. So I started working there, doing a production of The Abduction from the Seraglio. As ticket manager, I had to be creative about how we would sell those tickets. Needless to say, the show was sold out. New York City Opera was an extraordinary learning experience. In many ways, I feel closer to City Opera as an alma mater than I even do to my college. It was a crucible of people dedicated to the same cause. After New York City Opera for 4 years, I went to Chicago. I was managing director of Chicago Opera Theater for 6 years. It was really important that I had experience at opera companies before coming to Opera America so that our services aren't theoretical, but they're practical.
Opera America in the 80s had nowhere near the scope of services one associates with Opera America today. They were searching for a president, and Artist Clinic said, "We've got our person, Marc Scorca." And when Artist Clinic said something, that was it.
The vision that I had from the start was to open up Opera America.
25 or 30 years ago, companies did not feel comfortable sharing information with each other. Everybody was very kind of secretive.
And at the annual conference, for example, tracks of activity for marketing, for fundraising, for artistic production were part of the growth of Opera America during Marc's tenure.
All parts of the opera world have to communicate with one another, have to work together to achieve success in this very challenging art form.
When you're thinking, oh God, cash flow is so awful, it's nice to know when your buddy from Milwaukee goes, oh my God, cash flow is just so awful in the month of May, and you're like, I feel better.
I don't know how many hundreds of weekends he has spent with opera companies to really work through their issues and problems.
You get to a place where everyone's ready to throw their hands up, you've got people in different camps. Marc has a wonderful way of finding the commonality among people. He was raising money for the Performing Arts Alliance. Marc made this speech giving voice to something that we were all feeling, and it was the weirdest thing. Everyone just got out their checkbooks. We all wanted to hire him as our development director.
What happened at San Diego is such a great example of what Marc is capable of. The reason that company still has its doors open has to do with his intervention, along with David Devan and some other people. It really shows what Opera America can do, and it shows what Marc's capabilities are. He can be objective because he doesn't represent any one opera company. He represents all opera companies. He is on the road all the time. I hope he has time for life, you know?
People are always surprised when they come to visit me in Vermont. They don't see the opera person, they see someone who enjoys mowing meadows on my Kubota tractor. It was Patricia Kiernan Johnson who said, I finally get it. You have to have a project.
Marc is a builder, and Marc just keeps building and building and building. He built a fabulous foundation in Washington, and then had the dream to come to New York.
We really needed a center a real national center, both figuratively and physically. This place is just buzzing with activity. There are auditions, there are rehearsals, there are meetings.
It's become a home.
There was a new discovery grant for female composers through Opera America, and I got discovered.
You know, he's really opened the door and made it a place that is really promoting the very important music of our time. Composers who are writing opera about issues that are relevant to audiences of today.
And Marc has all along found the funding for us to do new pieces, audience development, the data that Opera America collects, that I can take my patrons, audience members to and say, look at this wide range of work that is being done around the country. We can be a part of that. We can be at the forefront of that.
One of the great things that came out of Marc having invited me to do this panel was I met Marc Campbell, and he and Kimberly Reed and I created As One that really started in that room at Opera America.
In a period of tremendous upheaval and transition, Marc has played a leading role in giving support to emerging new expressions of how opera is presented to the public today. Hanging on to those things that we think are core, but letting go of the things that don't help us anymore.
I think his legacy is really the strength of opera going forward, making sure that this art form survives and survives in a thrilling and new way.
Making Opera America into something far more diverse and far more highly professionalized in so many different areas. It's really his baby now, and I frankly can't imagine without it. I hope he does not get any ideas about moving to any other situation that needs somebody as enterprising and as visionary as he is.
If you don't think something can happen, just watch Marc in action.